welcome to San Antonio's Influence Magazine show, the premier talk show where we introduce you to influential individuals doing significant work in the city of San Antonio and surrounding areas. Celebrate the spirit of business, leadership, and innovation. If this is your first time joining us and you'd like more information, you could find us at influencesa.com. That's influencesa.com. Like us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and for this particular episode of the show, all future and past episodes of the show, pull up your YouTube search bar, toss in San Antonio's Influence Magazine show. That word is critical. Get that word in there. When you get there, please subscribe, give us a like or a thumbs up, and hit that bell so that you don't miss any future episodes of the show. I'm your host, Cedric Fisher, 40-year career journalist and publisher of Influence Magazine brand. When we come back, we're going to introduce you to today's guest. Don't go anywhere.
Everybody has a story to tell, or two, or three, or a dozen. If you've lived long enough, you will have experienced, maybe barely survived, real-life episodes that change you and never quite leave you. There are always little reminders.
Presented by Cedric D. Fisher and Company Publishers. Martin Kupas is a man who has lived many lives. He's been a cold warrior, a traveler, a writer. Plow the Dirt but Watch the Sky is a collection of his stories, taking you from the streets of Soviet East Germany to the fields of Oklahoma and to the pirate-infested waters of the Indian Ocean aboard a massive cargo vessel. If you're into true and real-life tales of action, adventure, intrigue, and even a bit of ironic humor, Plow the Dirt but Watch the Sky by Martin Kupas should be the next title on your bookshelf or e-reader.
Welcome back to the show. Before we bring on today's guest, let me introduce you to a little bit about his background. The Honorable Judge Peter Sakai is widely recognized in San Antonio as a leader who works hard to bring new ideas and solutions to the family court system concerning both child abuse and domestic violence. Most recently, he planned and developed the early intervention program of the Bexar County Children's Court. And of course, you know, last year he won a contentious election to fill the vacated position of Bexar County Judge. Help me welcome Mr. Peter Sakai to the show. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Thank you, Cedric. I'm honored and humbled to be here.
Very good. Well, let's get started. We've got some questions here, and I'd share a little bit about your background here, but tell the audience a little bit about yourself, ethnicity, and where you're from.
Sure. Well, I grew up in South Texas. I'm a second-generation Texan. My grandparents immigrated from Japan and settled in the Rio Grande Valley. Now, my mother's side, my maternal grandfather was one of the first farmers down in the Rio Grande Valley around the McAllen Far area. My father's side of the family settled in the Imperial Valley of California. And at the outbreak of World War II, that's where they were. And if you recall, there was an executive order, what we call 9066, by President Roosevelt that ordered the internment of all Japanese Americans and Japanese citizens because of the war with Japan. And so my father's family was put into internment camp until the war was over. And then after the war, my father enlisted in the United States military, served the military, and then when he was honorably discharged, he went and settled in the Rio Grande Valley where he met my mama. And then, of course, I got born and raised there, so I grew up down in Rio Grande Valley, went to school, and then got up to University of Texas at Austin, got my undergraduate and law degree there. And then when I left the law school, came to San Antonio to start my legal career as an attorney in the district attorney's office. So I'll kind of pause there and see if you want me to go any further.
Okay. So you grew up in the Rio Grande Valley.
Yes, sir.
McAllen, far?
McAllen, far. Yeah, I'm a valley boy.
Good.
I'm actually an old farm boy, even though people would look at me and say, well, they wouldn't believe it. But yeah, I grew up on a farm where my dad would get me up at sunup and work me to sundown. And then at some point when I was a teenager, I inquired whether I was ever going to get paid because I wanted some money so I could go out on dates and, treat my dates out.
Sure.
And my dad said, "Don't you get room and board?" And I go, "Yeah, I do." And he goes, "Well, that's what you get." And so I said, "Well, I think I got to go look for a new job." So I learned real early the values of hard work and just doing a good job.
Outstanding. So share with us a current day in the life of Peter Sakai. What's your current situation?
Well, I've been on the job as county judge for about 40 days now, and I was a district court judge for 26 years, and so I heard all those cases involving children, families, anywhere from divorce to child custody to child support to child abuse and neglect, especially child welfare cases, children that were in our foster care system. And so I had served 4 terms as the judge of the 225th District Court. And here in Texas, we are elected in partisan elections. So I've been in the politics for many years now. And I had reached a point in my judicial career where I thought I had done everything I could for the child welfare system, especially for foster children. And so when Judge Nelson Wolff decided that he was going to retire, I decided I was going to step down from that position to step up to be the county judge. And so I was in charge of the children's court, and as a district court judge, I was in charge of everything. I made all the decisions. As county judge, I have to work with 4 county commissioners. I got 5,000 employees. I've got a $3 billion business, so to speak, that I have to run efficiently. And so it's been pretty fast and furious, Cedric.
Yeah, sounds like it. You've got some big shoes to fill with Nelson Wolff. Did he talk to you? Did he let you know he was going to retire and thought that you might be a good person to finish?
That's an interesting story. When I had made a decision to retire or move to senior status and perhaps hear cases as an assigned judge or do what's called mediations or arbitrations, that's when Judge Wolff signaled that he was ready to retire. Now, Judge Wolff, Nelson Wolff, and his lovely wife Tracy have been very good friends of mine along with my wife Rachel. And what we did, in fact, was to meet, and when he said that he was going to retire and step down at the end of his term, I just went ahead and told him, well, I'm ready to step up and run for your office. And it surprised him, perhaps even shocked him, because I was ready to retire and just move on to my next stage of life and not take on this big undertaking. And so when he heard that, his first question was, why do you want to do it? Are you really serious? Do you understand how big this job is? And do you understand that it'll be a sacrifice for you and your family?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I have 2 grandkids. And so I had to rethink and make sure that I had the commitment in my family and I had the energy to go to the next level and be county judge. It's much like a CEO, chief executive officer. I have to share that responsibility for other county commissioners. And we got to work all together to try to solve the problems of Bexar County. And so, but because I had focused in on children and families as a district court judge, I felt well suited. I'll be honest with you. I have continued to look through an equity lens of what's good for children and families. And that's going to be my guiding light, so to speak, my North Star of how I will be as county judge of Bexar County.
Okay. It's good you brought that up. There are a lot of folks that we're all aware of you and Nelson Wolff and the county judge, but we don't necessarily know what they do. So maybe you can kind of share with us, just enlighten the audience on
Great question.
What that job is.
Great question, Cedric. The county judge, as I indicated, is the chief executive officer, but he shares that along with the 4 county commissioners. And the county commissioners court, for those that didn't take civics, or if they did, they weren't paying attention like me, county government is an extension of state government. When our state of Texas was set up in the 1800s, the founding fathers, so to speak, wanted to make sure that there was no centralized government. So county government kind of ran things at a local basis. And so what they did is they had an elected county judge, and in the rural counties, the smaller counties, the county judge does a lot of judicial functions. In the metropolitan, big municipalities, such as Bexar County, Harris with Houston, Dallas with Dallas, Tarrant with Fort Worth, Travis with Austin, the county judge is more an executive administrator. So what we do, our primary function is to set the budget. And that's a $3 billion budget. We are in charge of the jail and making sure that we provide a place for people who need to be locked up and do their time, so to speak. We also are in charge of the courts. And so we have to make sure that our judges are well positioned and have the ability to function as courts, which means we have to make sure that there's district clerks, there are county clerks, that there are court bailiffs, there are court reporters, in order so that the courts can run. The other big function of the county is to make sure that we provide health care to everyone, especially the indigent. And so Bexar County is responsible through its university hospital system, we often call that UHS, and making sure that we're providing high quality medical care for those in need. And I'm very proud that we have a university hospital system that's the envy of the nation. They provide high quality care and indigent care, and we will continue to do that as we expand our medical services in the south side by Texas A&M San Antonio, and on the northeast side over by the old Retama horse track. And so the county plays a big role. Now, I think what happens is that a lot of people say, well, isn't the city and the county the same thing? And what I mean by the city is City of San Antonio.
Right.
Remember that City of San Antonio covers most of the inner city, so to speak. But what people don't recognize and sometimes overlook, I'm also responsible for 26 other municipalities. I'm also responsible for the unincorporated areas, and we have a tremendous amount of unincorporated areas where the people are building houses and development is going. And the county must be responsible, making sure that we have responsible development, that we're providing the infrastructure, that we're putting in the roads, we're putting in the water lines, we're putting in the sewer lines. And now, in our current world, we got to make sure that we are providing high-speed internet connectivity, the digital divide, which is a big problem. And what we learned during COVID was that there were people, mainly students, young children, that were disconnected from their schools because they had no Wi-Fi.
Right.
You and I probably take it for granted. And there's no problem because we got cable TV and we've got a bundle package and everything's fine. We found out that a lot of economically disadvantaged kids had to go to McDonald's or go to libraries in order that they could do their schoolwork. So, Cedric, the county has a lot of responsibility, and I have to make sure that everyone in our county is taken care of, especially the smaller municipalities and the unincorporated areas.
So when you say unincorporated, does that include anything within the city limits, or is it like
no, it's everything
Divine,
outside.
Castroville?
It's outside. No. That's Medina County.
That's Medina County. Okay.
It's outside the city limits, but within the Bexar County lines.
Okay.
And there is, especially on the southwest sector, the southern sector, and southeastern sector, there's a tremendous amount of unincorporated areas. Perhaps on the north side, I think the city limits, so to speak, of San Antonio have reached out to the county lines. And so perhaps people get confused about thinking city and county are the same, and they're not.
They're not. Okay.
They're not. The city of San Antonio is what's called a home rule city, which means they can rule by ordinance and their own rulemaking authority. The county, on the other hand, is run by state statute. And we can only do what the state allows us to do because, remember, we're an extension of the state. And so here, the county judge, I don't do judicial functions. Every day, people are talking to me saying how they can help this county.
Right.
They got the greatest idea. I've got people, nonprofits, that are asking for assistance because they provide a valuable service to our community. And then finally, I ran for county judge, Cedric, because I want to fix things. And I want Bexar County to provide better customer service, which means we got to work harder and we got to work smarter. And I've got to break these silos of bureaucracy. Sometimes, if you've ever dealt with the city of San Antonio or Bexar County, you'll see people say, well, that's not our job. That's not my responsibility. And I understand we got to stay in our lane, so to speak, but I want to make sure that good government means that we're providing customer service. And that's the thing I'm doing every day, is to evaluate our county government, evaluate our departments, talk to my department heads, talk to the other elected officials, be it the sheriff, be it the district attorney, be it the district court judges or the county court of law judges, the district clerk, the county clerk, the tax assessor, collector. Ooh, I could keep going, Cedric, but those are all people. I have to make sure we're all working together.
Right. What would be your top 3 priorities that you want to go and fix? You use the word fix. What would be those things?
Well, for one, some people have asked me, okay, Judge, what's your 100-day plan and what are you going to fix, like you're asking me? What I think is most important, Cedric, is that I go on a listening tour and I go listen to the citizens. I talk to my department heads. I talk to these elected officials so that they tell me what they think needs to be done. Now, having said that, and to, as you say, get to the bottom line and fix the problems, I say from a more bigger picture, a more macro level perspective, I think we need to focus in on economic development. I've got to make sure that Bexar County is the county of choice. People want to come to Bexar County to relocate their corporate headquarters, but at the same time, Cedric, I want to make sure that small businesses are taken care of. I think small businesses are the engine, the heart and soul of economic development in Bexar County. And so as we perhaps give tax incentives and tax benefits, tax credits to the big corporate citizens, we also make sure that our small businesses are included, especially from a diversity and equity lens. The other issue is what I call education and workforce. If you talk to any small business, they'll tell you, there's restaurants in particular, we don't have enough employees. We can't run our businesses. Some businesses are going under because of the cost of labor. And so we also know that we have to make sure that our education system matches our workforce. And what I mean by that is I created in my campaign a program called Cradle to Career. We need to make sure that when people are born, that they're getting wellness and nutrition and they're getting a healthy development, that they transition to a good pre-K program, that they get the resources they need so that they can hit the public school and be ready. We got to make sure our public schools are operating at the highest level and being held accountable. And then I want to make sure that when somebody finishes public school, basically graduate from high school, they've got a skill set. They're ready to go work. Now, let's hope that everybody goes to college. Let's hope that, you get a degree and you're professional and you make a lot of money.
Right.
But we know here in Bexar County, we have a problem. We know that a lot of our students, especially in the economically disadvantaged areas, they're not going to college. And I truly believe they're not prepared for the workforce. And so I am asking or wanting small businesses community, the corporate community, to partner up with the public schools.
Yeah.
And let's create mentorships. Let's create apprenticeships. Let's create a work skill program. Back in my day, and you can see by my hair, it's been a few years.
A few years ago.
They had what was called vocational programs. And you were taught a trade, basically.
Sure.
And I think we transitioned to, well, no, let's get everybody for college. I think the magic sauce, so to speak, is somewhere in the middle. We need to be able to make sure our kids are literate, that they're hopefully ready for college, and we know that that is a problem because a lot of kids cannot pass their GED, which means they need a lot of remedial work. And so we've got to pick up our game, so to speak, when it comes to our public education. 2, we've got to make sure that our kids have some type of skill set. And that's the reason why I want to see a partnership with the small businesses so that they can provide incentives, they can provide jobs, they can provide financial assistance to the public schools that are obviously, we continue to struggle how to fund our public schools, that they get the adequate funding. That's a big issue right now in the legislature. And then finally, I want to make sure that public safety and public health are addressed. And what I mean by that is we got to make sure that our communities are safe. I'm totally committed to make sure that we are working in the best way to make sure that we're dealing with the issues of crime, that certain areas probably need more attention. But at the same time, I want to make sure that we're holding our law enforcement community accountable. Unfortunately, we do have issues with the law enforcement, and they need to be held accountable. And so I want to make sure they're being held accountable, but at the same time, let's all work together. Let's figure out how law enforcement, the courts, the probation departments, our jail system all work together. You mentioned my experience in the judicial system. I truly believe in restorative justice. And what restorative justice means, Cedric, is focusing on the positive aspects of people. Trying to find, when they come into our justice system, criminal situations where you break the law, family situations because you get a divorce or custody, property disputes, child support cases where you might have to pay child support. We have a lot of people who come in contact with our justice system. Our traditional system has been punitive-based. Sometimes in our education and justice system, we've created what's called a school-to-prison pipeline. And so we've got to break that type of mentality. When people come into our system, especially the justice system, that's the reason why my family drug court, my early childhood court, my infant toddler court, we worked hard to put children back with their parents, especially parents who had drug and alcohol addiction, parents who have significant mental health issues, because they were traumatized themselves and are a product of generational poverty. Also, domestic and family violence. Those are issues that destroy families. And so when we break things down at that level, I learned we can come up and fix things. And we can fix things by putting families back together and keeping children out of the foster care system. So, Cedric, I could go on, but in essence, that's kind of where I want Bexar County to go.
We're having a conversation with the Honorable Bexar County Judge Peter Sakai. We'll be right back.
Have you ever found yourself sitting on your couch after a long and unrewarding day at the office, asking out loud, "Can I do better for myself? Isn't it time to create those opportunities that I deserve?" Author Don Glynn has spent a lifetime asking that question. Now, he's taken his experiences and wisdom and committed them to written form. Born in Texas and having a troubled childhood, Donald Glynn Jr. is no stranger to adversity. He grew up without a full-time father, the result of a divorce. He struggled to make it in high school. He dropped out of college. He couldn't find his direction in life. His situation seemed hopeless until he made a decision to make his own fortune rather than wait for it to come to him. Don's debut title, Shut Up and Work, is a manifesto containing real-life tales of surviving, thriving, then ultimately leaving the 9-to-5 workforce. His vivid recollections of horrible bosses, workplace politics, and toxic work environments are both entertaining and cautionary, and perhaps may even be familiar. If you're frustrated and feeling trapped on the corporate plantation, as Don puts it, then Shut Up and Work is a title that should be in your hands.
Welcome back to San Antonio's Influence Magazine show. I'm your host, Cedric Fisher, and we're here with the Honorable Bexar County Judge, Mr. Peter Sakai. Welcome back, Peter.
Thank you.
Let's get back to the questions here. So let's talk about your inspiration for becoming a judge. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Oh boy, that's a whole life story. I will tell you this. If you would have asked me as a young kid, young teenager, young college student, even a young law student, if you would have said, would you ever dream to be a district court judge, much less a county judge, I would say, you're crazy.
Yeah.
There's no way. There's no way. I'm just a farm boy from South Texas who's done right. And so...
Because you had a lot of options. Could have went the
I had a lot of
private
options.
practice.
And I think what I've learned and what I would pass on to my children and pass on to anybody who's listening to this show is that I took the path least taken.
Okay.
I didn't ever take the easy route. When I grew up and I was down in South Texas, I was going to the local college because I was the oldest and didn't have the financial resources to pay for college. My parents said, you're on your own. So I went and worked and went to the local college there. And then at some point, I decided that if I was going to move up, I needed to move out of where I lived. I was hanging out with my buds, and we were probably doing too much partying.
So you meant out of the house or out of the region?
Out of the region.
The area, okay.
Yeah, because, I grew up along the border.
Yeah.
So there was places to go where you could have a lot of fun and spend a lot of money. So I went to University of Texas at Austin, and then, to be frank with you, I didn't know what to do when I had a government degree. But I had a friend who said, why aren't you going to law school? I'm going to go to law school. And this friend of mine was somebody that came out of what they call Highland Park, Dallas, a very rich neighborhood. And this person had a lot of wealth, but for some reason we were good friends. And she helped me take the LSAT. We prepared for the LSAT, the law school admissions test, and I was fortunate to get into UT. When I went to UT, Cedric, I was the only Asian American in UT Law School. There were 1,500 kids in there, and I was the only one. There were very few Hispanics, very few blacks. This is the mid to late 70s, all right? And so after my first year, I didn't do so well. And this is although I'd done very well throughout my whole career. Yeah. I never studied as hard as I can. I was just I was below an average student. And so I questioned whether I was to be part of this. And then obviously a lot of the students had connections, sons, daughters of lawyers, judges, professional people. My dad was just an old farmer who struggled just to pay the bills and get his kids through. Yeah. And then when I graduated from law school, I couldn't find a job. But I called on a friend that I went to law school with, and they said, wait, come to San Antonio and go work for the district attorney's office. And so along the way, I always got help from a friend. Mm-hmm. And that's another life lesson, is that you can't make it through a world without friends or networking. And people should value friendships. They should value a network. People should help each other and give a hand up as opposed to a hand out. And that's kind of been my guiding light as county judge. There was a point one time when I ran for judge, and I don't say it too much because I lost a political race. It's the only race I lost. It was back in the early 90s. And I was told that, Judge, you're a great lawyer. You'd probably make a great judge, but you'll never be a judge in Bexar County. And I said, what do you mean? They said, Judge, you're an Asian. This is a Hispanic community. You won't make it. And I had to kind of accept it at that time.
Yeah.
But I think like any person of color, sometimes we take it as a challenge. Sometimes we take it like, hold it. No, that's not right.
Yeah.
And so perhaps because of the way I was raised, it made me work harder. It made me try to do my very best at all times. It also gave me a sense that I had to give back to my community. And as a result, I was elected about 10 years later. And then, Cedric, guess what? I'm the county judge. I'm the top dog of this county. And so that's, I think the lessons there is, if you want something, you got to go after it. You've got to, but you got to pay. One, nothing can be given to you. And this is something my father, although he and I didn't necessarily get along or agree from a especially political point, he was very conservative. He had a crew cut. I had long hair, and I was pretty liberal back in that day.
So you've cleaned up well.
I cleaned up well. And so you take the path least taken, but you come with a core value. Yeah. And I think if you live to those principles, you'll always succeed. Don't know if you'll be the county judge, but you'll get where you want to go. And so I've been very fortunate. I have been very blessed.
Given your experience with Executive Order 9066, what's your motivation now for underserved communities or disenfranchised people?
That was an experience that my father made sure that I understood and I knew. And I'll give you a life story growing up. I just told you, he and I didn't necessarily agree, and sometimes we would just get into arguments over anything.
Typical father-son.
Typical father-son.
Been there, and I got a son too. So.
That's right. And I've had my arguments with my son. And so, but I'm also mindful that, I need to learn to listen and be very tolerant and patient. But that's another story. But in regards to the Executive Order 9066 and my dad teaching me that story, what he did is we took a summer trip back in the high school days in the late 70s. We got in a station wagon and we traveled from South Texas to California. It'd take about 3-4 days. Couldn't go over very fast because the car would overheat and we would have to stop and let the radiator cool down. But the bottom line is he took me to where he grew up, which was Poston, Arizona. And that was the internment camp. And it was a godforsaken area, middle of Mojave Desert. And there was nothing there except concrete pads. And I said, this is where you grew up? He goes, yeah, this is where I grew up in high school in the internment camps. I said, well, there's nothing here. He goes, yeah, because it was an old cavalry army base, and it was really just a bunch of barns. It was a barns, yeah, that's where we lived. They lived in the horse stalls. And I went, what? Now, the other part of the internment issue was the fact people lost their businesses, people lost their possessions, people lost their rights. And I think that was something that struck me. Because of the mass hysteria, because of the racist discrimination of that order. I mean, it's later was established there was no reason to do it except we had mass hysteria, and it was the elected officials who succumbed to this mass hysteria. And so 9066 taught me and has continued to be my kind of guiding light. We can never, ever take for granted our constitutional rights. We can never, ever succumb to the public will, especially when we don't like certain people. The 9/11 situation, and I believe the attacks on the Muslim community, because people were very angry about the Muslim community. We also see it now with the attacks on Asians. And they hate language that is often used. We see it with any people of color.
Yeah.
And so it just is a reminder, Cedric, that we can never forget history. And I'm bothered when there are political attempts to portray history just in a certain way. And so 1966 has taught me never forget who I am, never forget the things that my parents went through.
Right.
And just be more diligent and be more with fidelity to our Constitution, make sure that all people, especially marginalized people of color, the LGBTQ community, people that are different.
Yeah.
We cannot ever discriminate or marginalize them.
Given that experience in your nationality and background, do you feel an obligation or a responsibility to uplift your race every day when you go to work?
I think there's a responsibility that I uplift everyone, regardless of color. Now, I'm very more sensitive to issues with people of color. There are issues that I learned as a judge, and I had to get training on this. I had to get training on disproportionality, which means the justice system, affects certain people of color unproportionately. Why are there so many people of color incarcerated? Why? I'll just call things out as I see it. Why do young black men are subject to more interrogation or stops? Why are young black girls more than likely disciplined in the school system and expelled because of unruly behavior? I also got training on what was called implicit bias. And that was a really eye-opener, because even with me and my history, my training, my core beliefs, sometimes I had to be very careful about being judgmental. Now, it's counterintuitive because as a judge, I am judgmental. I have to make a decision.
You got to make a decision.
But I can't be judgmental in sense of bias, prejudice. I can't say, hey, well, I think Cedric is this type of person. I don't know who you are. We're having a great conversation, but I really have to get to know you and get to hear from you to really understand who you are and what you are. And I shouldn't stand in judgment and say, well, I think Cedric is this or that. And I think that's what elected officials have to be. They have to understand that our justice system, sometimes our history has not been, and obviously the internment issues is one example that's very personal to me. But obviously you, as a African American, you've got your own experiences. And this is what I tell people of color. I don't know what it means to be African American, but I do know what it means to be different. I do know what it means to be teased and taunted as a kid. I do know what it means when you, as a kid, used to make prayers to God, well, why'd you make me different? Why couldn't I have blonde hair? Why couldn't I have blue eyes? Why couldn't I have a name that people wouldn't make fun of? Because there's those stories of, as I grew up in South Texas, I had to defend myself, defend my honor. I had to, push back, so to speak, on people who teased and taunted. Make sure, as you know, sometimes on the streets, you got to demand respect. And sometimes you had to push back on those that were bullies. And unfortunately, we live in a society now where I think a lot of children suffer as a result of things that I put up with, I dealt with. I think it's a much tougher world we live in. Part of that, a lot of the social scientists know more what the root causes are. Yeah. But things are tougher now. Things are meaner. Things are more in your face, so to speak. And at the same time, things can be more subtle. Things can be more vagary as to, and so we got a lot of work to do, Cedric. And so I'm hoping that with this conversation today, we can move forward and we can hopefully have a better world for our children and grandchildren.
It's our prayer. Next question, and
Yeah.
we'll lighten it up a little
let's
bit.
lighten it up.
Very few people get to ever really know a judge and access to a judge. So what kind of extracurricular activities do you participate in? And what would be your motivation for those particular?
Well, I'm an old jock.
Okay.
An old jock. So I used to play a lot of sports. I mean, pick up basketball, softball, just racquetball. And so I probably don't do that as much as I would like to. My extracurricular activity at this point is to go to the boxing gym and work out.
Okay.
Now, it's not necessarily a hobby, but it's a recreation that I enjoy. And I think punching the bags is very helpful for me, especially when you're upset at people and you can kind of project on those bags, those boxing bags of taking your stress out. So that's kind of the jock in me that enjoys to exercise, walking, and of course, my wife would probably say, yeah, he also watches too much TV.
Okay.
And so I need to be careful with that. I also
Gotta
like
relax,
to read.
though.
I read, and I like to read books that have aspiration and inspiration. And so I think that kind of helps rejuvenate me, especially in the world I live in, when it can be toxic. It can be very negative and brutal, so to speak. And so, and I'm a person of faith. And so I try to stay balanced and try to stay on an even course.
Okay, good, very good. The topic of books is my next question, actually. We get the privilege of interviewing a ton of leaders on this show, and one thing we've realized that they all have in common is leaders are readers. They're always reading something. Their favorite go-to book is typically found on their nightstand. What book's on your nightstand?
What books are on my nightstand? Oh, I got two, and you're going to probably kind of look at me because they're titles. And so I want to I'll give you the titles to it and then kind of explain. One is Extreme Leadership, which is a book, and I'm nearly finished reading it. It's how the U.S. Navy SEALs have operated and been successful. And so it's a strong book on leadership. The other one is, I think says Jesus CEO.
I'm familiar with that.
And it's a book about religious wisdom and religious teaching and how it applies to leadership and how we should be servant leaders, how we need to be better leaders. And so I have a book that kind of tells me, hey, this is how you win. This is how you overcome your enemy. And then there's that other part that says, this is how you should serve.
Yeah.
And you should have a core belief. And so I try to merge those two. That's the reason why I say I want to explain that, because you could say, wow, what's that all about? And it's just an effort for me to be a better person.
It's two good books.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. For those who do know you well, what's the one thing that they don't know about you but should? You may have to think about that one for a second.
Yeah, I want to think about that one. What they should know me, let's see. I think it's the fact that I'm really a very private person, although as a county judge, as a politician, somebody that's run 4 or 5 times, you would presume, boy, he's got a big ego, and and as you heard, I can speak on the stump, I can present well, but the reality is, even today, I'm got my nerves. I've had to kind of breathe and just try to take your questions in and then also be able to answer them I just want to be real. I want to be genuine. And so a lot of people don't realize that, when I was in law school, you would call it panic attacks. I mean, I was terrified of public speaking.
So you have human emotions like the rest of us.
Yeah,
Anxieties.
I'm very human.
Yeah.
And so hopefully I think people have learned to appreciate that, but I think sometimes I'm taken for granted of that I can fix things, or I can, that I have this supernatural ability. And I think my ability is to listen and to put people together and to try to come up with solutions and have people succeed. I think that's the kind of the magic sauce. So, but otherwise, I really don't care to go give a speech. Mm-hmm. I'd stay at home and read my books.
You're a real person. Mm-hmm. Last question. In terms of your accomplishments, and you have many, what would be your favorite personal accomplishment and professional?
I guess my biggest accomplishment is that I've overcome the fears that I've had to endure. Some of that was the way I was raised. My parents did the best they could. My dad was a tough dad. He was tough on me, but made me a tough guy.
Yeah.
And so I think that has been a major accomplishment in for all the stuff you've gone through, pretty good. Mm-hmm. I think, again, it's nothing material. It's nothing political. There's not many other people that have been a district court judge for 4 terms, 3 of them unopposed, which I reflect as a positive affirmation of my work. And now run for county judge in a very contentious primary and general election. I had a tough primary in the Democratic primary against 2 Hispanic females. And then I had a general election with a Republican female. Both of those opponents were elected officials. Mm-hmm. And so, I take great pride in that. Yeah. But I think my biggest pride is the fact that I stepped up and took the risk. And that's the other life lesson. You can't play it safe.
Yeah.
You got to go for it.
Very good. You have an opportunity to say anything you would like to share in parting words to the viewers.
I hope the viewers are able to kind of take this conversation and look upon their own lives and realize that, hey, if this guy could do it, I can do it. And whatever that may be, is it being an entrepreneur? Is it being a better parent? Is it getting involved with a charity and trying to make a difference? And the bottom line is truly have a sense of compassion and truly care for our community, because if there's any time in the world that we have to come together, it's now. We are living in very difficult times, and I feel there's a big pressure of we're what we call a zero sum, winner take all or nothing, take it or leave it. And so I think, and I see the children, especially the mental health of children, that suffer as a result. And that's something I want to work on as county judge. I want to make it better for our children and grandchildren.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
We appreciate you coming in to see us.
It's been a pleasure.
It's the Honorable Bexar County Judge, Peter Sakai. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you all next time.